This is a response to Silversoul's video Pistis and Agape, I think that's the correct pronunciation, which is talking about belief and practice within particularly Christianity, but religious faith more generally. And it was something of a response to my questioning of something that Veritas 48 had said, where he'd claimed that if it had been demonstrated to him conclusively that the historical Jesus never existed, i.e. that his belief in the existence of that historical figure was proved invalid, then his whole world would be kind of broken, really, and his faith would be broken. There'd be a major existential crisis of faith for him. And I found that quite difficult to understand. I couldn't understand the amount of importance that was given to belief in a particular historical fact in that case, as opposed to I don't know, some kind of wisdom associated with what a person might say, or a set of ideas, or a set of entertainments that one might engage in. And Silversoul, you responded, Jonathan, really nicely to that. I thought it was a great video, really excellent stuff. I'm not really up on the history of Christianity, so that was some excellent information for me there. But some questions and thoughts that for me came out of that. I mean, you're contrasting, I thought, really helpfully, religion as a belief system, i.e. something that you would, a set of proposals and propositions that you make a kind of mental assent to, that you kind of accept these propositions mentally, you adopt a mental position of belief, and that constitutes your religious faith. And you were contrasting that with a set of practices, religion as a practice. And I've come across that before, and I think it's a very powerful idea. There are some, just things that come out of it for me, really. I mean, the first thing I have to say is a reservation I have about that, and I don't think it's a reservation that's going to go away anytime soon, but it's just, I might as well out it now, really, which is this, that if I was given the choice between living in a world of religious believers and living in a world of people who practice their religion, I would probably prefer to live in a world of believers. I'm probably saying that from a particularly British perspective, because religion in the UK is very different to what I understand religion to be often like in the States and in other places in the world. Because although many people in the UK, most people in the UK, including myself, were brought up to consider themselves religious, or to announce themselves as members of the Church of England, it's an incredibly insipid faith, and it's quite wonderful for that, in my opinion. It makes no demands on you at all, really. So it's a kind of organised atheism, which meets every Sunday and tells you sort of stories. It's very, very mild form of faith. So being a believer in the UK, at least for myself, means almost nothing. Whereas actually practicing the faith, it would be very different. It would involve actually doing certain things, and I think that's that's probably true, and more true actually, in fact, for more strident faiths than the Church of England. I guess if you are a practicing Muslim, it isn't enough to simply make that kind of mental assent, to kind of agree in your mind that these things are true. To believe these claims, you actually have to do things, and some of those things you have to do might be quite difficult for the people around you. And the same if you're a member of any faith. A lot of the practices that some faiths hold very close as central, I would have a big problem with. I have a big problem with ritual slaughter, which is part of some faiths. I have a big problem with, obviously I have a problem with suicide bombing, that goes without saying. I have a big problem with all kinds of dietary requirements that certain faiths has. I have a big problem with practices which exclude women from participation in politics. I have a big problem with religious practices which which exclude or actively persecute homosexuals. I have a problem with religious practices that involves the bombings of abortion clinics. So there are practices which, you know, might not be central to the faith, but certainly emerge from it. You know, and even some of the milder ones. Even some of the practices like, you know, giving 10% of your income to the church. For me, you know, that's 10% of an income that could be better spent, really. Personally, that's what I think. So I don't. So as I say, if I had the choice of living in a world of believers and living in a world of practicing religious individuals, I would live in a world of believers. Okay, just a couple of things around that. You say something about, can you, I don't know, I've written this down so I might be misquoting completely. Can you practice something whilst actively disbelieving? I don't think you did say that, actually. I think that was something I responded to. You were talking about the relationship between practice and belief, and how belief is kind of arbitrary. It's the practice that's important. Is it possible to practice whilst actually disbelieving? I mean, I know it is, because I've practiced all kinds of stuff just for my own interest, really, whilst not actually having a belief, just to see what happens to beliefs when you go on to, when you carry out the practices. And I'm also reminded of this really fantastic talk as part of the TED Talk series. You probably know this one. It's called My Year of Living Biblically. I'll put a thing up on the sidebar, which is just a journalist who chose to live for a whole year following all of the tenets of the Bible, not just the famous 10, but all of them, the 400 or whatever it is, rules that are in the Bible, and wrote about it afterwards. And it's just fantastic. But he talks really nicely about the actual kind of cognitive and behavioural effects it had upon him, just to go through the motions. So the practice came first, you know, saying thank you, doing the various things that you need to do, and not exactly the belief, but the cognitive accompaniments to that, like feeling grateful, and that followed on behind that, which I thought was really interesting. Okay, I think that's all I've got to say, actually. Yeah. Actually, yeah. There's just two last things. I'll keep one very short. One of the problems I have is the language of a lot of this stuff I find really, really impenetrable, I have to say. And I wish I didn't, and I'm trying to understand it. But it seems to me it's kind of needlessly impenetrable. I mean, you got this phrase, living in Christ, for example. I'd have to say I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means. I mean, does that mean what would Jesus do? Is it that kind of role modelling? I don't know. I can't get to it. I can't get to the meaning of a lot of this stuff. I get the strong suspicion, and I may be wrong here, I get the strong suspicion that a lot of the ideas that you're coming up with here, that you're relating to me about your particular faith, would be really appealing to me, and I would probably really enjoy them if they weren't buried in language that I just can't get inside of, really. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've got to say. There was something else I was going to talk about, but I see I've already used 8 minutes of everybody's bloody time, so I'll leave it there. Thanks very much for that really thoughtful response, Jonathan. I do enjoy that.